Hey, right. Today is Sunday, which is the day after the first recording, and I think you have been out with George today, or you've been round hours with George, and hopefully had a good day. I have been fannying around trying to get data off my phone, which was successful, so hopefully no more cutouts. It's presently sleet outside and it's lovely and shitty. All the more reason to record things in the nice warmth of the inside. Okay, well, here we go. We're picking up from when Ugru was asked to sing by his master. Ooh, I'll try not to. Right, so. It's not very good focus. Right, is that going to focus? There we go. Right, sing me a song. What songs do you know? Sing! Master pulled his glasses off. His eyebrows were furrowed, serious. Ugru began to sing an old song he had learned on his father's farm. His heart hit his chest painfully. Nuzogbu, Nuzogbu, Enyimba, Enyimba. He sang me a song. What song? Your message has just come through on Viber. He sang in a low voice at first, but Master tapped his pen on the table and said, "Louder." So he raised his voice, and Master kept saying louder until he was screaming. After singing over and over a few times, Master asked him to stop. Good, good, he said. Can you make tea? No, sir, but I learn fast, Ugru said. The singing had loosened something inside him. He was breathing easily and his heart no longer pounded, and he was convinced that Master was mad. I eat mostly at the staff club. I suppose I shall have to bring more food home now that you're here. Sir, I can cook. You cook? Ugru nodded. He had spent many evenings watching his mother cook. He had started the fire for her or fanned the embers when it started to die out. He had peeled and pounded yams and cassava, blown out the husks in rice, picked out the weevils from beans, peeled onions and ground peppers. Often when his mother was sick with coughing, he wished that he and not Anulka would cook. He had never told anyone this, not even Anulka. She had already told him he spent too much time around women cooking, and he might never grow a beard if he kept doing that. Well, you can cook your own food then, Master said. Write a list of what you need. Yes, sir. You wouldn't know how to get to the market, would you? I'll ask Jomo to show you. Jomu, sir? Jomu takes care of the compound. He comes in 3 times a week. Funny man. I've seen him talking to the croton plant. Master paused. Anyway, he'll be here tomorrow. Later, Ugru wrote a list of food items and gave it to Master. Master stared at the list for a while. Remarkable blend, he said in English. I suppose they'll teach you to use more vowels in school. Ugru disliked the amusement in Master's face. We need wood, sir, he said. Wood? For your books, sir, so I can arrange them. Oh, yes, shelves. I suppose we could fit more shelves somewhere, perhaps in the corridor. I will speak to somebody at the works department. Yes, sir. Oddingbo. Call me Odenigbo. Ugru stared at him doubtfully. Sir, my name is not Sir. Call me Odenigbo. Yes, sir. Odenigbo will always be my name. Sir is arbitrary. You should be the Sir tomorrow. You could be the Sir tomorrow. Yes, sir. Odenigbo. Ugru really preferred Sir, the crisp power behind the word, and when 2 men from the works department came a few days later to install shelves in the corridor, he told them that they would have to wait for Sir to come himself. He himself could not sign the white paper with typewritten words. He said Sir proudly. He's one of the village houseboys, one of the men said dismissively, and Ugru looked at the man's face and murmured a curse about acute diarrhea following him and all of his offspring for life. As he arranged Master's books, he promised himself, stopping short of speaking aloud, that he would learn how to sign forms. In the following weeks, the weeks when he examined every corner of the bungalow, when he discovered that a beehive was lodged in the cashew tree and the butterflies converged in the front yard when the sun was brightest, He was just as careful in learning the rhythms of Master's life. Every morning he picked up the Daily Times and Renaissance that the vendor dropped off at the door and folded them on the table next to Master's tea and bread. He had the opal washed before Master finished breakfast, and when Master came back from work was taking a siesta, he dusted the car over again before Master left for the tennis court. He moved around silently on the days that Master retired to the study for hours. When Master paced the corridor, taking in a loud voice, he made sure that there was hot water ready for tea. He scrubbed the floors daily. He wiped the louvres until they sparkled in the afternoon sunlight, paid attention to the tiny cracks in the bathtub, polished the saucers, and he used to serve cola nut to Master's friends. There are at least 2 visitors in the living room each day. The radiogram turned on low to strange flute-like music, low enough for the talking and laughing and glass clinking to come clearly to Ugu in the kitchen or in the corridor as he ironed Master's clothes. He wanted to do more, wanted to give Master every reason to keep him, and so one morning he ironed Master's socks. They didn't look rumpled, the black-ribbed socks, but he thought that they would look even better straightened. The hot iron hissed, and when he raised it, he saw that half of the sock was glued to it. He froze. Master was at the dinner table finishing up breakfast and would come in any minute now to pull on his socks and shoes and take the files on the shelf and leave for work. Ugu wanted to hide the sock under the chair and dash to the drawer for a new pair, but his legs would not move. He stood there with the burnt sock, knowing Master would find him in that way. "You've ironed my socks, haven't you?" Master asked. "You stupid ignoramus." Stupid ignoramus slid out of his mouth like music. Sorry, sir. I told you not to call me sir." Master picked up a file from the shelf. "I'm late." "Sir, should I bring you another pair?" Ugu asked, but Master had already slipped on his shoes without socks and hurried out. Ugu heard him bang the car door and drive away. His chest felt weighty. He did not know why he had ironed the socks, why he had not simply done the safari suit. Evil spirits, that was it. The evil spirits had made him do it. They lurked everywhere, after all. Whenever he was ill with the fever, or once when he fell from a tree, his mother would rub his body with okwuma, and all the while muttering, "We shall defeat them. They will not win." He went out to the front yard, past stones placed side by side around the manicured lawn. The spirits would not win. He would not let them defeat him. There was a round grassless patch in the middle of the lawn, like an island in a green sea, where a thin palm tree stood. Ugu had never seen any palm tree that short, or one with leaves that flared out so perfectly. It did not look strong enough to bear fruit. Did not look useful at all, like most of the plants here. He picked up a stone and threw it into the distance. So much wasted space. In his village, people farmed the tiniest plots outside their homes and planted useful vegetables and herbs. His grandmother had not needed to grow her favourite herb, arigbe, because it grew wild everywhere. She used to say that arigbe softened a man's heart. She was the second of 3 wives and did not have the special position that came with being the first or the last. So before she asked her husband for anything, she told Ugu, she cooked him spicy yam porridge with arigbe. It had worked always. Perhaps it would work with Master. Ugu walked around in search of arigbe. He looked among the pink flowers, under the cashew tree with the spongy beehive lodged on a branch, the lemon tree that had black soldier ants crawling up and down the trunk, and the pawpaw tree whose ripening fruits were dotted with fat, bird-burrowed holes. But the ground was clean, no herbs. Jomo's weeding was thorough and careful, and nothing that was not wanted was allowed to be. The first time they met, Ugu greeted Jomo, and Jomo nodded and continued to work, saying nothing. He was a small man with a tough, shriveled body that Ugu felt needed a watering more than the plants that he targeted with his metal can. Finally, Jomo looked up at Ugu Jomu, he announced, as if Ugu did not know his name. Some people call me Kenyatta after the great man in Kenya. I am a hunter. Ugu did not know what to say in return because Jomo was staring right into his eyes as though expecting to hear something remarkable that Ugu did. What kind of animals do you kill? Ugu asked. Jomo beamed as if this was exactly the question he wanted and began to talk about his hunting. Ugu sat on the steps that led to the backyard and listened. From the first day he did not believe Jomo's stories of fighting off a leopard barehanded or killing 2 baboons with a single shot, but he liked listening to them, and he put off washing master's clothes to the days Jomo came. And he liked listening to them, and he put off washing master's clothes to the days Jomo came, so he could sit outside while Jomo worked. Jomo moved with a slow deliberateness. His raking, watering, and planting all somehow seemed filled with solemn wisdom. He would look up in the middle of trimming a hedge and say, "That is good meat," and then walk to the goatskin bag tied behind his bicycle to rummage for his catapult. Once he had shot a bush pigeon down from the cashew tree with a small stone, wrapped it in leaves and put it into his bag. "Don't go to that bag unless I am around," he told Ugu. "You might find a human head there." Ugu laughed, but he had not entirely doubted Jomo. He wished so much that Jomo had come to work today. Jomo would have been the best person to ask about Arigbe, indeed, to ask for advice on how best to placate Master. He walked out of the compound to the street and looked through the plants on the roadside until he saw the rumpled leaves close to the root of a whistling pine. He had never smelt anything like the spicy sharpness of Arigbe in the bland food Master brought back from the staff club. He would cook a stew with it and offer Master some with rice, and afterwards plead with him, "Please don't send me back home, sir. I will work extra for the burnt sock. I will earn the money to replace it." He did not know exactly what he could do to earn money for the sock, but he planned to tell Master that anyways. If the Arigbe softened Master's heart, perhaps he could grow it and some other herbs in the backyard. He would tell Master that the garden was something to do. He would tell Master that the garden was something to do until he started school. Since the headmistress at the staff school had told Master that he could not start mid-term. He might be hoping for too much, though. What was the point of thinking about a herb garden if Master asked him to leave, if Master would not forgive the burnt sock? He walked quickly into the kitchen, laid the Arigbe down on the counter and measured out some rice. Hours later he felt a tautness in his stomach when he heard Master's car, the crunch of gravel and the hum of the engine before it stopped in the garage. He stood by the pot of stew, stirring, holding the ladle as tightly as the cramps in his stomach felt. Would Master ask him to leave before he had a chance to offer him the food? What would he tell his people? "Good afternoon, sir, Odenigbo," he said, even before Master had come into the kitchen. Yes, Master said. He was holding books to his chest with one hand and his briefcase with the other. Ugu rushed over to help the books. "Sir, you will eat?" he asked in English. "Eat what?" Ugu's stomach got tighter. He feared it might snap as he bent to place the books on the dining table. "Stew, sir." "Stew?" "Yes, sir. Very good stew, sir." "I'll try some then." "Yes, sir." "Call me Odenigbo," Master snapped before going in to take an afternoon bath. After Ugu served the food, he stood by the kitchen door watching as Master took a first forkful of rice and stew, took another, and then called out, "Excellent, my good man." Ugu appeared from behind the door. "Sir, I can plant the herbs in a small garden to cook more stews like this." "A garden?" Master stopped to sip some water and turn a journal page. No. Outside is Jomo's territory, and inside is yours. Division of labour, my good man. If we need herbs, we'll ask Jomo to take care of it." Ugu loved the sound of division of labour. "My good man," spoken in English. "Yes, sir," he said, although he was already thinking of what spot would be best for the herb garden, near the boys' quarters where Master never went. He could not trust Jomo with the herb garden and would tend it himself when master was out, and this way his arigbe, his herb of forgiveness, would never run out. It was only later in the evening that he realised master must have forgotten about the burnt sock long before coming home. Ugu came to realise other things. He was not a normal houseboy. Dr. Okeke's houseboy next door did not sleep on a bed in a room. He slept on the kitchen floor. The houseboy at the end of the street with whom Ugu went to market did not decide what would be cooked. He cooked whatever he was ordered to, and they did not have masters or madams who gave them books saying, "This one is excellent, just excellent." Ugu did not understand most of the sentences in the books, but he made a show of reading them. Nor did he entirely understand the conversations of master and his friends, but listened anyway and heard that the world had to do more about the black people killed in Sharpeville, that the spy plane shot down in Russia served the Americans right, that de Gaulle was being clumsy in Algeria, and that the United Nations would never get rid of Tshombe in Katanga. Once in a while, master would stand up and raise his glass and his voice to that brave American that led into the University of Mississippi, to Ceylon and to the world's first woman prime minister, to Cuba for beating the Americans at their own game, and Ugu would enjoy the clink of beer bottles against glasses, glasses against glasses, bottles against bottles. More friends visited on weekends, and when Ugu came out to serve their drinks, master would sometimes introduce him, in English of course. "Ugu helped me around the house, very clever boy." Ugu would continue to uncork bottles of beer and coke silently, while feeling the warm glow of pride spread up from the tips of his toes. He especially liked it when master introduced him to the foreigners like Mr. Johnson, who was from the Caribbean and stammered when he spoke, or Professor Lehman, the nasal white man from America who had eyes that were the piercing green of a fresh leaf. Ugu was vaguely frightened for the first time he saw him, because he had always imagined that only evil spirits had grass-coloured eyes. He soon knew the regular guests and brought out their drinks before master asked him to. There was Dr. Patel, the Indian man who drank Golden Guinea beer mixed with coke. Master called him Doc. Whenever Ugu brought out the koala nut, master would say, "Doc, you know the kola nut does not understand English," before going on to bless the kola nut in Igbo. Dr. Patel laughed each time with great pleasure, leaning back on the sofa and throwing his short legs up as if it were a joke he had never heard before. After master broke the kola nut and passed the saucer around, Dr. Patel always took a lobe and put it into his shirt pocket. Ugu had never seen him eat one. There was tall, skinny Professor Ezeka, with a voice so hoarse he sounded as if he spoke in whispers. He always picked up his glass and held it against the light to make sure Ugu had washed it well. Sometimes he brought his own bottle of gin, other times he asked for tea, and then went on to examine the sugar bowl and the tin of milk, muttering, "The capabilities of bacteria are quite extraordinary." There was Okioma, who came most often and stayed the longest. He looked younger than the other guests, always wore a pair of shorts, and had bushy hair with a parting at the side that stood higher than master's. It looked rough and tangled, unlike master's, as if Okioma did not like to comb it. Okioma drank Fanta. He read his poetry aloud on some evenings, holding a sheaf of paper, and Ugu would look through the kitchen door to see all the guests watching him, their faces frozen as if they did not dare to breathe. Afterwards, master would clap and say in his loud voice, "The voice of our generation," and the clapping would go on until Okioma said sharply, "That's enough." And there was Miss Adebayo, who drank brandy like master and was nothing like Ugu had expected a university woman to be. His auntie had told him a little about university women. She would know because she worked as a cleaner at the Faculty of Sciences during the day and as a waitress at the staff club in the evenings. Sometimes, too, the lecturers paid her to come in and clean their homes. Where are we? She said university women kept framed photos of their student days in Ibadan and Britain and America on their shelves. For breakfast, they had eggs that were not cooked well, so the yolk danced around, and they wore bouncy straight hair wigs and maxi dresses that grazed their ankles. She told a story once about a couple at a cocktail party in the staff club who climbed out of a nice Peugeot 404, the man in an elegant cream suit, the woman in a green dress. Everybody turned to watch them, walking hand in hand, and then the wind blew the woman's wig the wind blew the woman's wig off her head. She was bald. They used hot combs to straighten their hair, his auntie had said, because they wanted to look like white people, although the combs ended up burning their hair off. Ugu had imagined the bald woman, beautiful, with a nose that stood up, not the sitting down, flattened noses that he was used to. He imagined quietness, delicacy, the kind of woman whose sneeze, whose laugh and talk would be soft as the under feathers closest to a chicken's skin. But the woman who visited Master, the one he saw at the supermarket and on the streets, were different. Most of them did wear wigs. A few had their hair plaited or braided with thread, but they were not delicate stalks of grass. They were loud. The loudest was Miss Adebayo. She was not an Igbo woman. Ugu could tell from her name, even if he had not once run into her and the housegirl at the market and heard them both speaking rapid, incomprehensible Yoruba. She asked him to wait so that she could give him a ride back to the campus, but he thanked her and said he still had many things left to buy and would take a taxi, although he had finished shopping. He did not want to ride in her car, did not like how her voice rose above Master's in the living room, challenging and arguing. He often fought the urge to raise his own voice from behind the kitchen door and tell her to shut up, especially when she called Master a sophist. He did not know what sophist meant, but he did not like that she called Master that, nor did he like the way she looked at Master. Even when somebody else was speaking and she was supposed to be focused on that person, her eyes would be on Master. One Saturday night, Okioma dropped a glass and Ugu came in to clean up the shards that lay on the floor. He took his time cleaning. The conversation was clearer from here, and it was easier to make out what Professor Ezeka said. It was almost impossible to hear the man from the kitchen. We should have a bigger Pan-African response to what is happening in the American South, really, Professor Ezeka said. Master cut him short. You know, Pan-Africanism is fundamentally a European notion. You are digressing, Professor Ezeka said, and shook his head in his usual superior manner. Maybe it is a European notion, Miss Adebayo said, but in the big picture we are all one race. What bigger picture, Master asked. The bigger picture of the white man. Can't you see that we are not at all except to white eye? Can't you see that we are not all alike except to white eyes? Master's voice rose easily. Ugu had noticed, and by his third glass of brandy he would start to gesture with his glass, leaning forward until he was seated on the very edge of the armchair. Late at night, after Master was in bed, Ugu would sit on the same chair and imagine himself speaking swift English, talking to rapt imaginary guests, using words like decolonize and Pan-African, moulding his voice after Master's, and he would shift and shift until he too was on the edge of his chair. Of course we are all alike. We all have white oppression in common, Miss Adebayo said dryly. Pan-Africanism is simply the most sensible response. Of course, but my point is that the only authentic identity of the African is the tribe, Master said. I am Nigerian because a white man created Nigeria and gave me that identity. I am black because the white man constructed black to be as different as possible from his white. But I was Igbo before the white man came. Professor Ezeka snorted and shook his head, thin legs crossed. But you became aware that you were Igbo because of the white man. The Pan-Igbo idea itself came only in the face of white domination. You must see that tribe as it is today is a colonial as a product. You must see that tribe as it is today is as colonial a product as nation and race. Professor Ezeka recrossed his legs. Hold on. The Pan-Igbo idea existed long before the white man. Master shouted, "Go and ask the elders in your village about your history. The problem is that Odenigbo is a hopeless tribalist. We need to keep him quiet," Miss Adebayo said. Then she did what startled Ugu. She got up, laughing, and went over to Master and pressed his lips close together. She stood there for what seemed a long time, her hand to his mouth. Ugu imagined Master's brandy-diluted saliva touching her fingers. He stiffened as he picked up the shattered glass. He wished that Master would not sit there shaking his head as if the whole thing were very funny. Miss Adebayo became a threat after that. She began to look more and more like a fruit bat, with her pinched face and cloudy complexion and print dresses that billowed around her body like wings. Ugu served her drink last and wasted long minutes drying his hands on the dishcloth before he opened the door to let her in. He worried that she would marry Master and bring her Yoruba-speaking housegirl into the house and destroy his herb garden and tell him what he could and could not cook, until he heard Master and Okioma talking. "She did not look as if she wanted to go home today," Okioma said. "No, Okioma, are you sure you are not planning to do something with her? Don't talk rubbish. If you did, nobody in London would know. Look. I know you're not interested in her like that, but what still puzzles me is what these women see in you." Okioma laughed and Ugu was relieved. He did not want Miss Adebayo or any woman coming in to intrude and disrupt their lives. Some evenings, when the visitors left early, he would sit on the floor of the living room and listen to Master talk. Master mostly talked about things Ugu did not understand, as if the brandy made him forget that Ugu was not one of the visitors. But it didn't matter. All Ugu needed was the deep voice, the melody of the English-inflected Igbo, and the glint of the thick eyeglasses. He had been with Master for 4 months when Master told him, "A special woman is coming for the weekend, very special. You make sure the house is clean. I'll order the food from the staff club." "But sir, I can cook," Ugu said with a sad premonition. "She's just come back from London, my good man, and she likes her rice a certain way. Fried rice, I think. I'm not sure how you could make something suitable." Master turned to walk away. "I can make that, sir," Ugu said quickly, although he had no idea what fried rice was. "Let me make the rice and you get the chicken from the staff club." "Artful negotiation," Master said in English. "All right then, you make the rice." "Yes, sir," Ugu said. Later he cleaned the rooms and scrubbed the toilet carefully, as he always did. But Master looked at them and said they were not clean enough, and went out and bought another jar of vim powder and asked sharply why Ugu didn't clean the spaces between the tiles. Ugu cleaned them again. He scrubbed until the sweat crawled down the sides of his face, until his arm ached, and on the Saturday he bristled as he cooked. Master had never complained about his work before. It was this woman's fault, this woman that Master considered too special even for him to cook for. Just come back from London, indeed. When the doorbell rang, he muttered a curse under his breath about her stomach swelling from eating feces. He heard Master's raised voice, excited and childlike, followed by a long silence that he imagined their hug and her ugly body pressed to Master's. Then he heard her voice. He stood still. He had always thought that Master's English could not be compared to anybody's, not Professor Ezeka, whose English one could hardly hear, or Okuma, who spoke English as if he were speaking Igbo, with the same cadences and pauses, or Patel, whose English was a faded lilt. Not even the white man, Professor Lehman, with his words forced out through his nose, sounded as dignified as Master. Master's English was music, but what Ugu was hearing now from the woman was magic. Here was a superior tongue, a luminous language, the kind of English he heard on Master's radio, rolling out with clipped precision. It reminded him of splicing yam with a newly sharpened knife, the easy perfection in every slice. Ugu, Master called, bring Coke. Ugu walked out to the living room. She smelt of coconuts. He greeted her with his good afternoon and mumbled his eyes on the floor. Kedu, she asked. I'm well, Ma. He still did not look at her. As he uncorked the bottle, she laughed at something Master said. Ugu was about to pour the cold Coke into her glass when she touched his hand and said, Rapuba, don't worry about that. Her hand was lightly moist. Yes, Ma. Your master has told me how well you take care of him, Ugu, she said. Her Igbo words were softer than her English, and he was disappointed at how easily they came out. He wished she would stumble in her Igbo. He had not expected English that perfect to sit beside equally perfect Igbo. Yes, Ma, he mumbled. His eyes were still focused on the floor. What have you cooked us, my good man? Master asked, as if he did not know. He sounded annoyingly jaunty. I serve now, sir, Ugu said in English, and then he wished he had said, I am serving now, because it sounded better, because it would impress her more. As he set the table, he kept from glancing at the living room, although he could hear her laughter and Master's voice with its irritating new timbre. He finally looked at her as she and Master sat down at the table. Her oval face was smooth like an egg, the lush colour of the rain-drenched earth, and her eyes were large and slanted, and she looked like she was not supposed to be walking and talking like everyone else. She should be in a glass case like the one in Master's study, where people could admire her curvy fleshy body, where she would be preserved untainted. Her hair was long. Each of the plaits that hung down to her neck ended in a soft fizz. She smiled easily. Her teeth were the same bright white of her eyes. He did not know how long he stood staring at her until Master said, Ugu usually does a lot better than this. He makes a fantastic stew. It's quite tasteless, which is better than bad tasting, of course, she said, and smiled at Master before turning to Ugu. I'll show you how to cook rice properly, Ugu, without so much oil. Yes, Ma, Ugu said. He had invented what he imagined was fried rice, frying the rice in groundnut oil, and had half hoped it would send them both to the toilet in a hurry. Now, though, he wanted to cook a perfect meal, a savoury jollof rice, or his special stew with arigbe, to show her how well he could cook. He delayed washing up so that the running water would not drown out her voice. When he served them tea, he took his time arranging the biscuits on the saucer so that he could linger and listen to her until Master said, That's quite all right, my good man. Her name was Olana, but Master said it only once. He mostly called her Nukum, my own. They talked about the quarrel between Sardorna and the Premier of the Western region, and when Master said nothing about waiting until she moved to Nusuka and how it was only a few weeks away after all, Ugu held his breath to make sure he had heard clearly. Master was laughing now, saying, But we will live together, Nukum, and you can keep the Elias Avenue flat as well. She would move to Nusuka. She would live in this house. Ugu walked away from the door and stared at the pot on the stove. His life would change. He would learn to cook fried rice, and he would have to use less oil, and he would take orders from her. He felt sad, and yet his sadness was incomplete. He felt expectant too, an excitement he did not entirely understand. That evening he was washing Master's linen in the backyard near the lemon tree when he looked up from the basin of soapy water and saw her standing by the back door watching him. At first he was sure it was his imagination, because the people he thought the most about often appeared to him in visions. He had imaginary conversations with Anuka all the time, and right after he touched himself at night, N would appear briefly with a mysterious smile on her face, but Alana was really at the door. She was walking across the yard toward him. She had only a wrapper tied around her chest, and as she walked, he imagined that she was a yellow cashew, shapely and ripe. Ma, you want anything? He asked. He knew that if he reached out and touched her face, it would feel like butter. The kind master unwrapped from a paper packet and spread on his bread. "Let me help you with that." She pointed at the bedsheet he was rinsing, and slowly he took the dripping sheet out. She held one end and moved back. "Turn yours that way," she said. He twisted his end of the sheet to his right, while she twisted her right, and they watched as the water was squeezed out. The sheet was slippery. "Thanks, Ma," he said. She smiled. Her smile made him feel taller. "Oh, look, those pawpaws are almost ripe." Pawpaws. Lotqua. Don't forget to pluck them. There was something polished about her voice, about her. She was like the stone that lay right below a gushing spring, rubbed smooth by years and years of sparkling water, and looking at her was similar to finding that stone, knowing that there was so few like it. He watched her walk back indoors. He did not want to share the job of caring for Master with anyone, did not want to disrupt the balance of his life with Master, and yet it was suddenly unbearable to think of not seeing her again. Later, after dinner, he tiptoed to Master's bedroom and rested his ear on the door. She was moaning loudly, sounds that seemed so unlike her, so uncontrolled and stirring and throaty. He stood there for a long time until the moans stopped, and then he went back to his room. Right, job done. That was a long read. Hope you enjoyed it. And what are we? Next chapter. It starts with Alana again. Hope everything's going right for you when you're listening to this. If you're listening to this, and yeah, that's about it. Brain's a bit mushy after reading all that lot. Okay, see you soon. Bye.